Hello, everyone, and welcome to the episode of Faerie Fable Librarians. I'm Simona.
I'm Katie.
And today, Katie and I are going to be discussing the first two episodes of the animated anthology series, The Grimm Variations. And that premiered on Netflix April 17th of this year. And the anthology is based on fairy tales written by the Grimm brothers, but these fairy tales have like a twist to them. They don't follow exactly the formula of the Grimm brother fairy tales. So we're going to be talking about episodes 1 and 2. So if you haven't watched, there will be spoilers. So come back and join us when you have.
Unless you want the spoilers.
Yeah. So you've been warned. Spoilers. So episode 1 is titled Cinderella. And it focuses on the Otawara family. So Kyoko is our Cinderella character, and her father, like as in the Grimm Brothers tale, remarries because her father's a widower. We don't know what happened to Kyoko's mother, whether she passed of natural causes or something else happened.
And that tracks for the original story. We don't know.
So her father remarries a woman named Suruko, and Suruko has two daughters, Makiko and Sawako, and they're many years older than Kyoko. And so Suruko is the stepmother character, and she expresses some trepidation about entering the family because she's not sure if Kyoko is going to accept her, but her husband assures her, well, Kyoko is actually the one who wanted me to remarry, so she's perfectly okay with this situation. So the family moves in. Kyoko is very enthusiastic, for lack of a better term, to have a new family.
Absolutely.
She's very, saccharine is the best term for how I can describe her sweetness, or like
it's sickly sweet.
Yeah,
it's definitely a put upon.
And honestly, the direction that this episode went in wasn't a surprise to me, because early on when I was watching it, I realized, Kyoko, there's something wrong with this girl. Seeing her talk to a doll that talks back just said, she's something definitely wrong. Her older sisters butt heads with the stepfather as well as the servants, because it's suggested, or at least it's actually not said, it's clearly stated that their mother was a former geisha, apparently, unless that's a mistranslation. So the servants don't look upon the two sisters favorably. They think they're crass, they lack manners, they're rude, which for the most part their assessment is correct of the two sisters. And when you juxtapose their actions with Kyoko, it just further drives that wedge between the servants and the two sisters. Eventually, the two sisters, through a series of unfortunate and bizarre events, begin to realize that all is not quite right, that their happy, welcoming, bubbly sister, there is a sinister side to this bubbliness, for lack of a better term. They try to tell their mom, but their mom is reluctant to really listen because she believes that they're just being petty, vindictive, that they don't want to get along with their stepsister. And also, I believe she may also be motivated by concerns that because Kyoko has the attention and the heart of her father is willing to acquiesce and to make her happy in any way possible. So I believe also the mother may be motivated out of a sense where if we don't keep Kyoko happy and hence her father happy, we may not have a home anymore.
Right.
So I believe that might have been some of the motivation between not being really willing to listen to her daughters, which frustrated me greatly about this, because even if you believe your daughters may be motivated by selfishness or pettiness, they're still your daughters whom you've lived with all their lives. At least be willing to listen to why they have these concerns or why they may have these fears, but the mother just completely dismisses their concerns. Then we're brought to a funeral. The father dies in a car accident. The sisters, Makiko and Sawako, they do seem devastated by the loss of their stepfather. Kyoko is overjoyed, and this is when you realize that she is insane. She's overjoyed with the death of the father. She doesn't yet reveal why she's overjoyed, but she just amps up the sweetness The I'm willing to acquiesce to everything you say. She even at time, and you get like a 3 or 5 year
It's
time
a
jump.
5-year time jump. Yeah.
And and that's when you think that that she's going to follow the trajectory, or her storyline will follow the trajectory of the Cinderella story that we know, because she's essentially become a quote unquote servant. Her kimonos aren't as colorful.
She willingly
Yeah.
goes into that role. Yeah.
And you may think she's entered that role because now that the father is dead, the stepmother, but that's not the case. What you do learn is that Kyoko is a sociopath who enjoys manipulating people. She thinks of people as her dolls. You learn, that essentially she's manipulating those around her. She views them as her dolls to play with and discard as she sees fit.
Yeah.
At one point, the stepmother has an illness of some kind. It's not specified what the illness is, but Kyoko has been quote unquote tending to her. And the stepmother reveals there's going to be a ball, and Kyoko, of course, says, "Oh, I won't go, but my beloved sisters will go." And she says that you're going to find the best dresses, nothing but the best for my sisters. And the sisters sort of see the ball as an opportunity
To escape.
Because they
Which I don't blame them.
No, honestly, you don't. They definitely have their issues. There's definitely an arrogance about them, but I think it stems from insecurity about their background, because they aren't from money and privilege.
No.
And because the servants already look down upon them, that causes them to sort of become very reactive and snappish, and that just further drives the wedge between them and the servants, who essentially could be their source of confidence, their source of support, and the wedge just goes deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yeah.
So they attend the ball with the goal of catching the eye of Masataka, which is he's not really a prince, but he is the prince character from the original story.
He's a Grand Duke.
Yeah.
And dukes in any society are related in some aspect to the royal family.
Yeah.
So he is essentially a royal.
Yeah. So he throws this party. The sisters enter the party, and already they become the victims of sneers, derisive comments. Masataka approaches Sawako, and she makes a less than favorable impression. She actually gets drunk. Makiko is trying to retain some semblance of dignity and control, and what do you know? Kyoko shows up in a beautiful dress, which, and it's red. She immediately draws attention to herself. Masataka is immediately smitten, and, that's when the sisters basically, Makiko says, I know why you did this. They cause a scene, and they're eventually thrown out.
Yeah.
Masataka, who has no awareness of anything, really.
No.
He starts dancing with Kyoko, and he starts sort of expressing that that after the passing of her father, his household and her household has no longer really maintained any connection. I don't know if that was supposed to allude to some connection between the two of them. I would have liked, another criticism I had of the episode was, I would have liked for them to have established more of a relationship between Masataka and Kyoko. But I know in the original tale, it's love at first sight, but since these stories are supposed to do something different, I kind of would have liked more of a reason why he would be so drawn to Kyoko, because even while they're dancing, and this is when you start to hear her thoughts, you realize she orchestrated the accident that killed her dad, because he was threatening to take her toys away, essentially. He wanted to send the sisters abroad, and she wasn't going to have that.
Yeah.
That she has been poisoning the stepmother, and that she eventually kills the stepmother, and that she has grand plans for her sisters, and she has no regard or care for Masataka. She's essentially, at one point, the crowd literally disappears, and she's in a state of euphoria because of all that she's accomplished, and she's just so happy.
Yeah.
And of course, Masataka is in love. And she basically, at a certain point, she leaves the ball, and she says that she has to go, she has responsibilities, and she point blank tells him, "You will never see me again." Dead behind the eyes, nothing there, and Masataka, I guess, is smitten already. It's that's the one I must have. The stepsisters, the stepmother dies, the stepsisters confront Kyoko. Of course, the servants, Kyoko was a saint, would impossibly have killed anyone. And they get driven out of the house, which is, you learn, was their goal.
Well, they wanted to leave, but not in any way of getting kicked out, but
Yeah.
they see it as the opportunity to run away.
Which I was very happy for them. Unfortunately, it cost them their mom. But they eventually are able to leave that very toxic is not even the right word.
Well,
They leave that environment.
Toxic. It's a definitely toxic environment for sure.
And the episode concludes with Kyoko having a conversation with her doll about how,
They last the longest.
they lasted the longest. She's kind of a little put out that the dolls escaped, but she says, but I plan to have fun. And she's in her bedroom. Her husband wakes up like, who are you talking to?
Yeah.
And a part of you feels sympathy for her husband because he's essentially married a sociopath. God knows what she's going to do. Although I kind of wonder if she will be able to accomplish the same thing because her house is different. Like now she's in a much larger society. I kind of wonder how she will be able to play her game, whatever that game is, because it's not. She's going to start a new one and be successful at it. But that's how the episode ends. A part of me kind of wondered if the doll, at a certain point, I thought maybe the doll is the negative manipulative influence. Because the doll is just there.
Yeah.
You don't know how she acquired the doll, how long the doll has been there. And I thought that the doll was somehow possessed by her mother's spirit, but that was never indicated. But that's a good theory.
Yeah.
Because you don't know much about her biological mother.
No.
That's interesting. I never thought about that.
Yeah.
That's a good. Let us know what you think. That would be interesting if the doll is indeed possessed, because the doll, she has it. And at first I thought maybe you're led to believe she's being manipulated by this entity within the doll, which probably could have been, depending on how long she's had it.
Right.
It's a possibility.
Right.
So that concludes episode 1, Cinderella, and then we have episode 2, The Little Red Riding Hood.
Which,
It's that of the 2 episodes, this was my least favorite, and I will go into it. First of all, the world was very confusing for me.
Yes.
It's dystopian, and I understand maybe the episode doesn't have to tell you everything, but still, I kind of want to know about the world.
Context is important. So it's definitely dystopia. It looks like just like the rich and the powerful are of this utopian society where it's all like artificial. Your world is artificial. You have immortality within this world, and you see this world through this thing through eye drops.
Yeah. So like Katie said, it's a futuristic dystopian society where people crave the real.
Yeah.
And now that I'm thinking about it, it reminds me of Blade Runner, where basically real things exist, but they're hard to come by. So you live almost in this, as you mentioned, artificial digital kind of reality where I guess through the use of eye drops, which look like a crystal, you can you see what you want to. You could even adjust your own digital image.
Yeah.
Like I said, when the episode began, I thought, oh, this is interesting. But then afterwards, you're kind of like, okay, it's not as interesting as I thought. So those who have the money and the privilege can exist in these fabricated realities. And that's where you meet Mr. Gray, who's the wolf character in the Little Red Riding story.
Which would have been far more interesting had it not make the far left turn it had made.
And I'm going to talk about that too.
Yeah.
So Mr. Gray is the wolf character, and as Katie and I are talking, we're going to assume that most of you are aware of these fairy tales already, because Little Red Riding and Cinderella are pretty common fairy tales, so we're going to assume you know the origin stories of this tale. So Mr. Gray, as he's known, is the wolf character, and he is a sadistic killer who craves the sensation of the real.
Right.
Real
blood.
For him, the smell of blood, the taste of blood is intoxicating to him. And when we first meet him, he lures this young woman And I was really taken aback by the level of violence in this episode.
Yes. Yeah.
I thought there would even be some sexual violence, which if that was going to happen, like I remember as I was watching, I was like, I am going to turn this off if it goes that way.
Yeah.
Thankfully it didn't, but he murders a young woman covered in blood, and
I don't know which is worse.
Yeah, I mean, it was very graphic. I was taken aback, and yes, I know with the original tale, with a lot of these fairies, especially with the Grimm versions, there are elements of violence. So it's
yes,
not that
but it's not to the extreme in which the creators of this went, and I'll get into that when we're done.
So Mr. Gray is I don't know, and this is where I was very confused. I don't know if he is the one that created the eye drop, as it's called, or if he's part of a company that sort of just utilizes eye drop.
I think he's part of the company that utilizes eye drop. Yeah. It sounded like, the way I interpreted it.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's like a collective of the rich and the wealthy that operate and run this utopian society of this digital world, where everyone else who's not part of it is down on the ground in dystopian
slums, essentially. Because there's a Mr. Brown character. I was even wondering about the choice of name. I know that he wears brown, Mr. Gray wears gray, but I would assume there would be more to that, but who the hell knows? Maybe gray wolves, I don't know. I might be reading too much into that. And Mr. Brown basically admires that he's a connoisseur of the real, but essentially tells him, you can kill, be more classy about it, and try not to get caught.
Yeah.
Which is essentially what he tells Mr. Gray.
Right.
Mr. Gray decides to head into the slums, because where else can you find the real in the slums?
Yep.
And he meets this old woman named Rose, who I don't know if she's supposed to be the grandmother character of the tale. And he asks her to procure a victim for him so he can play out his hunt fantasy. Yeah. She says, I'll find the perfect one for you. And she essentially leads him to a young woman named Scarlet.
Yes.
Now, when you meet Scarlet, she's at a party. I'm sorry, I smacked the mic. She's at a party. She's about to leave. She's harassed by this hoodlum who sells eye drop. She rebuffs his advances, doesn't like it.
Yep.
So he smacks her. And lo and behold, Mr. Gray comes in.
Yep.
And gives him a 1-2. And she's like, oh my God, Mr. Gray. Well, she doesn't know his name. She says, oh my God, you're so... Well, she doesn't really say that. She just says, like, peace out, and she heads off. And he's the one that pursues her, obviously, because that's... she's his intended target. And she says, do you want to come home with me? And frankly, I kind of had an idea of where this was going to go. Like, I was, okay, fine. She's going to be the victim who's not a victim. Something's going to happen.
Yeah.
Needless to say, she turns the tables on him, drugs him, and he wakes up on an operating table.
Yep.
And when I saw this scene, I felt so bad for Mr. Gray, which if you're making me feel bad for a sadist who kills people, there's a problem. I have a problem with that.
Yeah.
Because I was really starting to feel for him and feel absolutely nothing for Scarlet.
Yeah.
And that scene also reminded me of, there's a film called Hard Candy, which is also, Elliot Page is in that film, and I can't remember the guy who plays the killer, but spoiler, it's like a Little Red Riding Hood retelling as well. Yeah. And there's a scene where Elliot Page's character, he turns the tables on basically, I think he's a sexual predator who's killed young girls.
Yeah.
And Elliot Page turns the tables on him, and there's a similar scene where he, like, pretends he's going to torture the killer, and he pretends that he's, like, castrated him.
Yeah.
And as I was watching, like, oh my God, that reminds me of Hard Candy. But the scene is a lot more violent and graphic in this one. And she proceeds to kill Mr. Gray. He basically says, aha, you thought you were the hunter. Turns out you were the one who was hunted.
Yeah.
And Scarlet returns to Grandmother Rose, I'm going to call her. And essentially, Scarlet is a sadist as well. Yep. She enjoys hunting. So, like, I watch them like, so am I supposed to be happy that a sadist killed another sadist, that a killer killed another killer? I would have preferred had she just turned the tables like in the Grimm version of the fairy tale, because in the Grimm's version, they have two versions. One where Little Riding is eaten, rescued by a woodcutter or a hunter. The other one, she rescues herself.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the French version, which is different. I would have just liked, had she been, okay, I'm aware of who you are, and I'm going to make sure you can never hurt someone again. She quickly disposes of him, boom, it ends.
Yeah.
Because yes, it would have been killing, but at the same time, it's like, it's defense, she knows who he is, but instead making her someone who's like him, who enjoys it. Well, what am I supposed to feel for this character? Am I supposed to go like, woohoo? Because she's going to do it, and this time it may not be someone who's sadistic. It may just be a genuinely nice person that she's going to just torture and kill.
Right.
So that's what I didn't like. And when looking at both episodes, I felt like I already knew the direction they were heading in.
Yeah.
There are more episodes. At this point, I don't really know if I'm interested in watching any of the other ones.
Yeah, I didn't like it. I am not opposed to variations of the original fairy tales. We have variations. We have tons of different variations.
Yeah.
Whether it's Cinderella, whether it's Little Red Riding Hood. But the variations that we got were not what we like. I was not expecting the variations to be the way that they were, the way I was shown. Yeah. Now, you can argue that there is violence in the original Grimm brothers. Well, yes, in the original Cinderella, the stepsisters cut off their heels and their toes to fit into the glass slipper, but then the crow in the tree that they have to pass, that's where Cinderella's mother was buried, is like, she's a fake, she's not, and that happens, but that's the extent of the violence.
Well, they get their eyes pecked out.
Okay, fine, they do get their eyes pecked out, but it's not like, there's no sadistic like we've talked about.
Yeah.
There's no like sadistic psychopathic reason for essentially their punishment, because in the original story, the stepsisters are vindictive, they are cruel, they're greedy, they're selfish. I mean, it's
so it's sort of like they get sort of their just desserts.
Yes.
Because the Cinderella character is, so
the original Cinderella character, she loses her mother, then she loses her father. She's forced into servitude in her own household. Her stepmother is cruel and neglectful and only cares about her children. With this, like, there's no magical fairy godmother. There's no, like, I understand that their supernatural entity is supposed to be like this doll and how it influences.
Which is maybe supposed to be the godmother character.
Yeah, but it's not really said. I don't want to take away from the creators' work, what their originality to these variation of the fairy tales. But for me, you've changed it too much. You've completely taken away what the essence of the fairy tales are, and you've left out things that make the fairy tale and I didn't enjoy Little Red Riding Hood. I didn't like seeing, like, I was making bread, and instead of pausing the show to take the bread out of my bread maker, I left the show running because I didn't care.
Yeah.
I did not care.
And there are, like, as you said, there are versions, like, even with Little Red Riding Hood, even in fiction, like, there's this one adult book where the Little Red Riding Hood character, in that world, wolves, like, men turn into wolves. And the Little Red Riding Hood character has to defend herself, because there's also an element of, like, they're playing with sexual violence in that book. men being like, which in the original tale, at least when Perrault was telling it, it was a cautionary tale for young women.
Yes.
Basically, and there was also a slang where if a girl had been compromised, she had met the wolf.
Right.
So it was a cautionary tale against women being tricked into compromising themselves. So that was the essential moral of the story.
Right.
So there is that element of sexuality, of violence, which is fine if I feel like it was used, I don't know, towards some point. Because I've seen versions where they play upon, like, there's the feminist retelling, and they made it into a film, which now I can't remember what it's called. But the young woman meets the wolf.
Yeah.
And after he's murdered her grandmother, they have a sexual relationship because it's about her awakening.
Right.
So she's not the victim. She is the one who's seizing control of her sexuality, of the situation. And that's fine. Like, okay, I can get behind that kind of retelling.
Right. It's not violence for the sake of being violence. It's not sexual for the sake of being sexual.
Yeah, because I don't know what the point. Like, is it... Because what is the point of the tale or the story that you've retold?
Right.
Because based on even with the Little Red Riding Hood, like with the society, okay, like there's been something happened because it's a dystopia. There was some decline, something collapsed. There's the people that are living in the real, where like they have real sensations or whatever. Even the real was like and then you have people like Mr. Gray, who live in this completely artificially generated reality, where even like his robot servant can alter his appearance based on, well, what would be more pleasing to you.
Right.
And that you get the sense where, okay, you may think after a while having instant gratification would be gratifying.
Right.
But then no, like you will eventually crave what is real. Okay, maybe I can get behind that messaging. Right. But what was the messaging behind Scarlet?
Right.
Like I see, I wouldn't have had an issue if she took down Mr. Gray.
Right.
But she was doing it for a reason other than gratifying her own perverse. Right. Because then who am I supposed to be rooting for? Unless that's the point. Maybe
maybe you're not supposed to root for anybody.
Yeah.
But then how is that enjoyable?
Yeah, and also like if you're retelling the tales, like the whole point of the tale too, especially with the Grimm brothers, is that the Little Red Riding Hood is able to overcome the wolf, and then she, goes on. With Cinderella, she overcomes her hardships, and she's rewarded.
Right, which was the point of the stories to begin with. Not to teach, and it wasn't there weren't children's stories; they were adult stories. But for adults to be like, oh, okay, so this is how our children should be, further on down the line.
Like I wouldn't have minded if I don't know, like, even if the stepsisters Cinderella, even if Makiko and Sawako weren't necessarily, like, evil cruel. Right. But they were, like, snobby and demanding. And then Kyoko basically, because she's so good, okay, fine, I'm going to bear with it because... And then, Masataka comes along and he manages, basically at the end he says, well, the father passed away, but you're no longer, he was mentioning, you have no legal right. Right. Like, had he come in and then you see the two of them building, because fine, now you get where the stepsisters, they're basically, it still would have been a subversion of some sort, I guess. But you end up basically saying, well, okay, well, I said Masataka, he's doomed. It's like... He married a psychopath or so, and I was like, okay, well, I don't know.
And like the Grimm brothers are telling these stories to their sister.
That's another thing. Like, are these the stories they're writing, or these are the stories that the sister is imagining?
I'm very confused about that. I don't think they actually need to be in the beginning, because when she talks about... At the beginning of Red Riding Hood, she talks about how she likes how Red Riding Hood goes into the field of flowers and is carrying bread and wine to her grandmother, and then we get into Little Red Riding Hood and it's like, what the hell is this?
Yeah, because
what the hell is this?
So the two brothers have their sister Charlotte, and I'm assuming at this point the brothers have already written the stories. So Charlotte will go up to them and say, oh, the Cinderella story. So it's unclear whether or not are the brothers narrating these tales.
Yeah.
Have the brothers already written them? And then the sister, because when she talks about the wolf, she expresses an anxiety about wolves.
Yeah.
And the brothers say, you don't have to worry about it.
It's only one wolf.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are these stories then how her anxiety is interpreting the stories? Like, that's what's still unclear to me. Like,
Yeah.
the brothers could be there, they couldn't be there. I don't think they add much to the anthologies.
I don't think they, I never thought we would have such problems with something that we watched, but I have such issues with these 2 episodes. Again, I'm not trying to take away from what the creators were envisioning with these original works, but it's not what I want.
Well, one like review I read about the first one was the very fact, well, what is the payoff?
Right.
Like they mentioned,
because there is no real payoff.
Like, but even for like the character of Kyoko, like, okay, she's like intentionally, like, she kills her dad, which in a way would be her sense of security.
Right.
So even if you feel nothing for him, wouldn't you be invested in at least keeping him alive?
Right.
Okay. She has the servants. Like, are we supposed to assume she has never done something to the servants? Like, I found it so odd how the servants were almost, you could argue I need them.
Right.
But if the father was still there, if she would have told them, you need to hire 3 new ones.
Yeah.
I'm assuming they had the money.
Right.
Where he could have said, okay, fine.
Yeah.
So then the servants would have been, so it's like, I don't understand why. It's indicative as if she would not even have touched the servants, which, considering who she is, that made no sense to me. Because they would have been easy.
Right.
Because they're dependents.
Yeah.
And granted, while the father would argue we need the servants, but I'm assuming he has the money where, okay, fine, I'll hire new ones.
Right. Right. The servants would have been easy picking.
Yeah. And then, like, the stepmother character. Yeah. This is not your daughter. I mean, she's your stepdaughter, but it's like, but you have 2 daughters that you've known. Like, why would you be so quick to bond or to take the side of that you haven't yet had a chance to really develop any relationship with?
Right.
And why would you completely discredit your daughters?
Right.
Even if you think you're brats.
Yeah.
Listen to them.
Yeah.
You know? Because then it seemed like toward the end that the mother was slowly starting to realize there's something not quite right.
Right.
You know, with her stepdaughter. But, like, it's like, I'm still trying to understand, like, why she would want to break up her family. Because if, say she killed the stepmother, she did kill her, decided to kill the step, which she was going to.
Yeah.
Okay, that would have been gone. It would have just been her and servants. She has no source of income.
Yeah.
What was she planning?
Because
it almost feels like the ball was an afterthought. So I'm trying to understand, like, you're destroying these people. Okay, you enjoy it, but at the same time, not very smart for your situation, because what are you going to do?
Right.
You know, so, and there was another person who, she brought up another good point about Kyoko and why she was doing certain things. It made no sense to her, but I can't remember now what it is. But essentially, I guess it would be, what would be the payoff? What would be your motivate? Like, what are you gaining?
Oh, so we're not the only ones who find this
no,
to not be.
I saw a Reddit thread, but I didn't click into it, where someone was like, I'm so disappointed by this anthology. And like I said, we haven't watched the other ones. There's Hansel and Gretel. There's
the elves and the shoemaker,
which I'm not familiar with that story.
So essentially, just quickly, there's a shoemaker who's down on hard times. He's trying to make shoes to keep his the shop open, and these elves come and make the shoes for him. Essentially, they make the shoes for him so he can stay in business.
Does he abuse the elves? And they basically said we're not going to have it anymore.
No.
I kind of have a feeling, and now I'm tempted to watch it, because based on your summary, I kind of have a feeling where they're going to go with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I guarantee it. Like the Hansel and Gretel, I have an idea of how they're going to do that.
Yeah.
Either one of the kids is going to, like, sacrifice the sibling. Like, I'm almost scared to watch Hansel and Gretel. Because I kind of feel like the witch is going to be the poor woman that was abused by children, so now this is or whatever, and probably Gretel's going to say peace out to Hansel, and he's going to get, I have a feeling. Like I think it's going to be like...
After watching these 2 episodes, I have no interest whatsoever in watching the other 3, I think, are in this, because it's just not it's not the variations that I thought I was getting, and it's not the variations that I would have wanted for myself, because growing up, I loved these I love fairy tales growing up with Cinderella, with Hansel and Gretel, with, all these things. And I was like, I would rather watch, if I wanted to watch any variation of like the Elves and the Shoemaker, it would be a Looney Tunes cartoon with Sylvester the cat. And an elf, every time you say Hassenpfeffer, turns into a mouse. I would rather watch that variation than this.
Yeah, like I said, there are always some retelling. Like, I know fairly recently there was a horror film on Hansel and Gretel. I think it's called Gretel and Hansel, because I guess switching the name order makes it more feminist. I don't know. It's called Gretel and Hansel. And the witch, it's a definite horrifying take. I mean, the story is already horrifying because she essentially murders and eats children. You can't get more horrifying than that.
No.
But I think in that case, I haven't seen it, but I'm sure it subverts where maybe the children, which is fine, if...
But if there's no real payoff to any of these stories, what's the point?
Yeah. So those are our thoughts on the first 2 episodes. Let us know what you think about them, what your thoughts are. And as always, we'll see you next time with another exciting episode. But I don't think Katie and I are going to continue with this series. But as always, leave a comment, like, subscribe, and we will see you next time. Bye.